Welcome to the Concept 101 podcast. My name is Stefan.
Jules?
And Daniel.
We are three concept artists currently working in the industry, as well as the organizers of the Concept 101 event in London. In today's episode, we'll be mainly discussing specialist versus generalist concept artists in the concept art industry.
Yeah. So today's topic is specialist versus generalist, which is something that I think over my short stay in the industry has come up so many times in conversations, both when I was a student and with students now, because it's one of those things where, I would say generally being a generalist takes a little bit longer because there are kind of more skills to learn in a way. And being a specialist can often be a faster way to get into the industry. So it's often a point of contention amongst people.
It's funny because I feel like it's almost a question that is only asked before getting a job.
Yeah.
And then when you get the job, I guess you just end up doing whatever.
Yeah, a lot of people get eventually pigeonholed into doing things over time, yeah.
Well, I guess it's whatever you agree to do it, and over time, as you said, you might. That's why it's important you decide what you want or you don't want, because afterwards, you might end up doing something you don't like and being hired because your portfolio is something you don't like.
Yeah,
Go on.
It's funny because my portfolio, I was hired to do vehicle projects for some time for Shark Mob, and I didn't have that many vehicles in my portfolio. I had some vehicle-based stuff, I would say, and even that wasn't exactly what I ended up doing. But I found it interesting because I thought my portfolio was very environment, keyframe heavy, and I was like, well, that's what I'm going to be hired for, and that turned out not to be like that, and it took me a while until I got to do the environment stuff. But
you did have although a very the reason you got to do vehicles is because
you had two vehicle projects in your portfolio at the time.
Which as a student is pretty big of a big chunk of a portfolio.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I think it was definitely a question that I asked myself a lot when I was in university about should I specialize something? Should I be a bit more generalist? And I think one thing I knew in uni was that I couldn't or didn't really have the passion to work as a character concept artist. I think I knew that I have interest in everything else, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy or I was just gonna say realistic or more stylized, but actually I prefer realistic work over stylized.
So you consider yourself now as a specialist? Or more
maybe
generalist?
I think I personally still consider myself quite generalist, except I don't do character designs basically. So I feel like I can do some character designs. I haven't done it in a long time. I had to do it as part of my university coursework. We had character concept art, so as one of the modules, so I had to do it. But I think I'm still somewhat of a generalist, mostly because I do environments, I do some keyframes, I do some hard surface in my portfolio, and I would say that's quite a generalist kind of portfolio.
It's interesting because I think me and Jules are definitely generalists. There's no two ways around that.
The main difference is the industry. Because we are in the movie industry, which just makes us work on many projects, probably one project per month, if not two, if not three.
All with different tasks.
Yeah, different tasks.
Different directors who want a different look.
You might have VFX tasks, then you're going to have to design an environment, and maybe this environment needs to have a vehicle, and then you need to design
kind of character in the background of that environment in the vehicle.
Another purple electric VFX, all of them.
It all becomes the same. Yeah, I think the VFX work is something that, for example, I don't do as much, right? I can't, I maybe can do it, but definitely not as good as you guys at all. Where they go, do some explosion or something.
It's a very counterintuitive thing. I don't think I've ever seen VFX concept in a student's portfolio. Have you ever seen?
No, I don't think I've ever seen in a student's portfolio, but then again, it's not the most interesting work in the world, I would say. And I think there's also a lot of misconceptions about what concept art in film is anyway. And most like if you go to lectures by people in the film industry or like companies like showing off their work, it's very rare that they show off VFX concepts in the first place. And even if they do, they're usually showing off the more interesting ones of like, hey, look at how this vampire design for Morbius is or something, and you know, maybe it's VFX work, but it's very painterly interesting VFX work. But I mean, so Stefan, you consider yourself kind of a generalist. Me and Jules are definitely generalists, kind of like by virtue of where we work. Did you guys have any kind of strong feelings when you were starting to get into the industry about what you wanted to do in terms of specialism versus generalism? Because I remember so many times people coming to me and saying stuff like, you know, like professionals, and having just like such virulently angry opinions about like, no, you have to be a specialist. No, you have to be a generalist. And it's a really like weird little divide in the industry where you find some people who will tell you you'll never reach success unless you study spaceships for 10,000 hours and you never look at a character ever again. And then you find other people who say, well, there's no fucking way I can hire you if all you can do is spaceships. So, you know, did you guys kind of get any advice like that from people, or was it just that your own kind of discretions about what you enjoyed?
I feel like many people, as you said, were saying different stuff. Especially depending. I think the stuff I got the most is like, and it's funny because I also do it now. People would ask me, it's like, where do you want to work? What do you want to do? And then if I would say, I don't know, I want to work at Bethesda because the place I wanted to work in the past, then they would tell me like, okay, so just do whatever they do there.
Which is great advice.
Yeah, I know, it's good advice. But then it kind of be like, okay, or let's say Dark Souls, then you kind of do characters mostly, or a few environments. But you, by selecting where you want to work, by thinking that way, you already restrain yourself to a specific art style and to a specific subject matter. Let's say sci-fi or
I guess
fantasy. And like by default, by thinking like this, you kind of go in a more specific way or like genre. Now I didn't really do that at the end because I think I didn't really know what I wanted to do that much. Or I was like, oh, that's actually very cool. Oh, actually cartoon is cool as well. Oh, actually movie stuff
you had, when I first met you, the majority of your portfolio was characters.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Jules is the character guy.
Yeah,
and then,
because it was very fun.
Yeah, but then almost immediately after I met you, you stopped doing them, and I haven't seen you really do a character since. Yeah, which is kind of funny.
I think I mostly stopped them because I started to work, and because of most of my work wasn't really character based. Even though the project I was on, I didn't get much chance to do characters. I feel like probably now it's going to switch a bit, vibing as Framestore, and Framestore doing more creatures. Which creatures I tackle them quite similar to the way I would tackle a character. Yeah. So maybe now it would change a bit, but yeah.
I mean, my big thing about generalists versus specialists, because I'll say this just to start off. If you get advice from one person saying you have to be a generalist or you have to be a specialist, just go with whatever you like the most and whatever's going to make you happy. But I've always kind of thought myself that for some time, I was kind of being a specialist. When I was a student, I was like, I'm going to specialize in doing environments, and I was doing a lot of architecture work and then a little bit of vehicle design and a little bit of prop design. And I was like, yeah, I'll be a environment concept artist and I'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I'll be able to go to a game studio. And the thing that kind of switched up for me a little bit that I think allowed me to become more of a generalist was, and you guys can say if you agree or not, I think that generalist is more of a mindset than an actual technical skills thing. I think if you can design, or 3D model a spaceship and you can do a really nice final render of it, or you can 3D model a piece of architecture or whatever it might be, I don't think there's any reason that you can't do that for a character, because I think all of these things follow the same fundamental principles. And then it's really just about reference gathering to make up for your visual library.
To an extent, yes. I think someone that has a lot of experience is going to be able to jump towards those stuff easily. Yeah. People that don't have enough experience, I don't think it's so easy.
I think very good character guys, they know much more than just design principles. Yeah, they know how to create like a great pose, and
the thing is that
just some fundamentals that you don't really have.
But I think that is part of, if you have I think the more experience you gain, the more generalist you kind of should be able to become in a way.
Totally.
If you can't pose a character, then you probably, if you can't pose a character for a character design, you can't pose it for a keyframe either. So if you're going to be able to do it for a keyframe, you have to learn how to do it for a character concept, right?
That said, I think the best way to learn is to do mistakes. And
of course, yeah.
If you just do characters, you're not going to do most of the mistakes that people do when you do a keyframe, because it's very different mistakes which are specific to doing keyframe. So if you only do just design sheets, or just sketches, or like just very heavy character stuff, then you just never met or never done.
Okay,
right?
I suppose I'm presuming that somebody has, you know, at least tried doing other stuff in this scenario. I guess what I'm saying is like, I find that there's a lot of like very good artists who I see who say things like, I only do sci-fi, for example, or I can't do fantasy. And I always think like, well, if you can do sci-fi, of course you should be able to do fantasy, because it's just like, if I give you the correct references, you know, you still apply 70-30, you still apply the same texturing principles, you still apply the same lighting principles. And at the end, it should functionally be the same process. And I think something that I've always seen with at least like students who tell me like, oh, I'm a specialist in like blah, blah, blah style, or I only do sci-fi or whatever, it's usually just like a mind block thing for them. Yeah. It's usually a thing that they've like self-imposed, being like, oh, well, I can't do fantasy. And it's like, well, have you tried? You know?
I guess it's a comfort zone. When you get very good at doing something, it might feel a bit more effortless to do it. Yeah. And then as soon as you see, oh, wait, efforts. Too hard for me. I'm not going to do it.
I think like for me, one thing that was always difficult was sci-fi. And really? And I have so much sci-fi work.
That's funny to hear, yeah.
I have so much sci-fi work because I loved sci-fi work, but I always found it incredibly difficult to do. And I would look up to like the stuff that Vitaly Bulgarov did, you know, back in the day, and be like, wow, this is amazing. I want to do it as well. You know, I want to be able to model like this and sketch like that, you know. And so I did it all the time. I tried really, really hard because I thought that for me at least, that was the part that came difficult and I admired the most. And fantasy was, at the moment, it felt like less difficult. And I would say like, I still think that for a difficulty, I would say fantasy for me comes more natural than sci-fi. Just that's what I think about for me. Yeah.
I always just think it's the same though. I don't know. It's like
maybe in your brain.
I think one of the things that like helped. Well, I mean, I guess we can get more into like maybe you should be a specialist, maybe you should be a generalist. But like one of the things that helped me become a generalist, I think, was I don't know why, but one day I was like looking at some keyframes, I was doing some paintings, and I was like, it's all just black and white. It's all just like value breakup, you know, no matter what you're doing, you could take the same value structure and apply it to any subject matter. Yeah, it's like, it becomes appealing.
It's like that Jama Learn Squared course where he was like, do these simple black and white thumbnails and be like, now change it into something else, and then change it. And you would do like, you would take the same black and white composition, which was one or two values, I don't remember anymore. And then you would add more values to it and change it to like something totally different, like from an environment to a keyframe to a character piece, you know, and it was still the same composition, you know, still the same arrangement of shapes, just in a different context. And I think
that's kind of what I mean.
Apply. Yeah, you are right on that sense, but I think a visual library is a thing.
But a visual library can always be helped.
It can be helped, but it helps when you have a good visual library to begin with.
Of course. Like, I'm not denying that somebody who specializes in gun design is going to be better than me at gun design. But
if you will take. I think it's more like just the time effort, right? Like you will take. You can design a fucking amazing gun, but to design to that standard, it will take you like a lot longer, maybe.
I think what I said about mistakes still is very true here. Yeah. It's just, you know, someone who is used to do the design a lot. He knows all the tricks about how to make a good creature design, and he also knows all the techniques, which you don't really know. I mean, kind of hard surface guy who uses Blender just switch to ZBrush and design a creature.
Okay, so I think that's a kind of different part of the conversation almost, where it's like, I suppose what I'm talking about is like fundamental stuff, where like, hey, look, if you can sketch a gun, you can sketch a character. Yeah.
So what we are saying here. Practice your fundamentals.
Practice your fundamentals, yeah. Shocking news. I think what you're talking about is more about like software generalism.
The process technique.
Yeah.
The ease of use, the speed.
Because that is a different aspect of being a generalist, which I think actually is something that I can't really speak for you, Jules. I'm very different to Stefan because you have quite a set process, I would say, compared to me.
For what?
Everything.
Everything. I don't know if I have a. You have a set process.
Okay, wait. Let's list out the programs that you use regularly.
Photoshop, Blender, and that's it for the most part.
Right. So
like regularly.
Yeah. So like I would say that I fairly regularly use ZBrush, 3D Coat, Gravity Sketch, Adobe Medium, Photoshop, Blender, and things like DAZ and a few other bits and bobs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would consider that as being part of a generalist, is that I also have a general knowledge of software which allows me to achieve different solutions to different problems.
A bigger toolbox. You have hammers and screws.
I have like the
and stuff.
Yeah, wrenches.
Yeah.
I have the smallest toolbox here, probably. Oh, that's so sad.
What is this? A toolbox measuring contest?
How many softwares do you know, dude? How many softwares do you know, dude? How many have you done?
But your hammer is much better now.
Have you did what is it? Have you did the tilt brush, dude? Have you did? Well, I did.
Yeah.
No, I mean, hey.
But I think that is part of it because I think
I think it's a key element of it.
For sure. The only exception to that I think is when your fundamentals are so strong that it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's like something. I mean, I really hope in my lifetime I'm able to achieve that level of skill where like I could be given a cube in Blender and turn it into something beautiful. Do you know what I mean? Just with painting on top of it and sketching and like using more traditional processes, because the software generalist thing I think is actually important for being a professional concept art now these days, because you have to be so efficient with all these different things to, you know, hand over sets to clients, hand over resources for them to use as well. And I guess you're doing kind of a different bit. You're doing different work if you're doing like Craig Mullen's generalist stuff, where like I guess in a way he specializes in painting, right? He's kind of a generalist, kind of a specialist.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird niches I feel like people can go into.
You know, because
I feel like we were making it really confusing for everyone.
That's
like,
fine.
Yeah, it's okay.
We're gonna entangle it at the end and explain.
I promise no such thing.
I think what you're talking about right now is being generalist into the subject you can tackle, but while being a specialist into your art style.
Right.
You know?
Yes. Do you know what I will say
Art
this?
style.
Can I say this? Here's another controversial opinion. This is my most controversial opinion ever. Okay. It's going to get political.
Very interesting.
Very political.
About to be very racist.
Yeah. But no, so I think that my opinion is that being a specialist is what am I saying? Being a generalist is being a specialist. I think if somebody would come to me and say, Daniel, like, you know, how did you become a generalist or whatever, I would say, well, I'm not really a generalist. I am a specialist in being a generalist. Like, that is my specialization, right? Like, if you're a gun designer, that's your specialization, and you would get hired for gun projects. And my specialization is that I can achieve a certain level of quality with any subject matter on any task, with any requirements. And that's what I specialize in, is like just being able to hit any target that's given essentially on any film or project.
It's very good for world building, basically.
Yeah.
It's the pros, I guess, of being a generalist is that you're being able to tackle many subject matters.
So you mean the pro of being a specialist in generalism?
Speaking in Daniel's language, yes, that's what I mean. Because, you know, like I guess you're just going to be able to tackle whatever the client asks you and not have to think too hard for too long about how am I going to make it. You know, you know your tools. You just select the tools you want, and you're going to be able to design stuff.
That was a really big thing for me. I don't even know how long ago it was. It was probably a year ago now. Probably wasn't even that long, but it feels like a bajillion years ago. Me and my friend Rhys Griffiths set up a thing called the Keyframe Challenge, where we were doing. Essentially, we were doing different briefs and putting them on Instagram, and then people would give in different versions of the brief there, kind of thing. And, you know, we kind of set arbitrary time limits for ourselves to do it. So I think on most of them, we were doing them in like 24 hours. So it was, you know, like maybe 2 working days essentially that we would finish them in. And that was a really great step forward in kind of becoming more of a quote unquote generalist, or specializing in being a generalist, because we purposefully were picking subject matters that both me and Rhys weren't super comfortable in, and making loads and loads of variety of like oh, this would be cool for this kind of style. Oh, this kind of image would be great because I've never done an image like that. And so on and so forth. And it was a really, really good way to get into the mindset, again, because that's what I kind of think a generalist is, but the mindset of being a generalist, where I was approaching keyframes and it was like the Arabian Nights one. And I was like, okay, so if I group my values like this and I do my composition like this, and then going into the next one, which would be like the Crystal Cave brief, and applying exactly the same stuff. And as we went through them, it got so much easier to do them because my mentality about how to do them changed over time, because it wasn't just, I wasn't going into it being like, oh God, I've never done a dragon concept before.
Yeah.
It was
how
like,
do I make the perfect dragon concept?
Yeah.
Like, how deep do I need to go into specializing into doing a dragon
exactly.
concept?
Because I was just like,
just do a keyframe that happens to have a dragon in there.
Exactly.
And then you just
you have appealing value structure,
yeah,
appealing composition. Everything looks nice. The design of the dragon can be cool. I don't need to know about dragon anatomy to do a cool dragon design because I have the right references around me.
I think something that also probably helps students and probably helped us as well to become more generalists or to go towards being generalists is to do projects which are quite broad. So you're not like, oh, I'm going to do this character, end of the project. You're like, no, I'm going to do this short story or like this short sequence. I guess it's more sequence, you know? Like this guy goes then to the castle and he sees a dragon and he kills a dragon and there's a whatever, you know. And by doing that, you have to design a castle, you have to design a dragon, you have to design the main character, you have to design his weapon, his armor, all of that. And by doing this kind of project, you just end up, just for like, you know, 5 keyframes, you end up designing all of it.
Which is funny because actually my final university project was like the kind of, I set myself like the ultimate generalist challenge essentially of like, I did 4 character designs for that project, which included iterations and sketches and stuff, but it was like 4 characters and I wrote like a fake little script and they went on adventures around the galaxy and I planned out like 3 episodes of this like fake TV show with these 4 characters. And it meant that I did 4 character designs, 2 vehicle designs, loads of world building concepts, like 20 keyframes, I think, creature designs, prop designs, architecture, everything. And I mean, there's probably some correlation with the fact that that was the project that I had in my portfolio when I got my job offer to join ILM as well, because I think it showed
that you can do most things in a
competent manner. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get to work next week.
You're not gonna be I don't know,
lost when they give you like a certain type of task. That you've never.
I'm gonna get to work next week and then you'll be like, no, that wasn't it. I mean,
it was just a 20K you gave us under the table.
Yeah.
That wasn't really
I think this kind of like university work is something that I had as well, and I had to do a lot of different styles, even though I mostly refused to do any kind of style outside of realistic in university, and luckily my teachers were usually quite nice about it, and I just explained to them that this is something that I wanted to specialize in.
Explain to them you're gonna enslave yourself.
No,
they don't let you do what you want.
No, what? No,
I will burn this building down.
And I will put myself in the military camp.
I that was like the one focus that I had, but I still had to do characters. Same like for my final year project. I think I had, from what I remember, I had like 2 final year projects basically, and both of them involved doing like some character work.
Yeah.
A lot of environment work, some prop work.
So at your studio and at most game studio, can you kind of explain how you've seen kind of projects get split up? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do they generally make people specialize in games compared to what we do?
I guess what's the work structure between people in the team?
Yeah. What are the different structures? What's like the most basic structure of specialism versus like the most complex you've heard of?
I think majority of concept artists, they would be separated into environment and character, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think like almost no matter what studio, I think that's where it starts. And then the character guys, as you said, like before, environment guys will do environment related props, character guys will do character related props. Sometimes maybe you'll switch it around. Sometimes maybe you'll have same tasks, so you like mix it up and you learn from each other a little bit and achieve some new ideas.
So it's possible that the guy who usually does environments end up doing, I don't know, a vehicle or a character.
So we haven't quite gotten to it, but I think that could happen. Maybe I'm making it up. I don't know, but I hope that there will be. No, I think so. Like there was one time when we worked as a team. We literally, it was like 5 or 6 of us got the same task, and we just all did the same things, and it didn't matter what we specialized in, and we were all just doing the same subject matter, same task, just trying to come up with as many ideas for it as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that was really, really fun, and we did it for like 2 weeks or something. And
nice.
But yeah, most of the times you specialize. So like I used to do a lot of vehicle work for Shark Mob, and that was something that I specialized in. And now I'm specializing more in environments. Just basically, I was really hoping that I would be able to do it because that's all that I always wanted to do. And eventually time came when I had the opportunity to ask to do some environment work. And every time I had opportunity to do a little bit of environment work, even when I was specialized in vehicles, I would do it. I would like be like, okay, I'm taking this task. And I would just, because sometimes I would finish my concepts before the deadlines or whatever. As funny as that sounds, probably, because I'm quite slow in terms of designs, but sometimes that would happen, and I would have like a week or two to just do some environment stuff, and I would do it. And eventually, I think I proved to people in the company that I'm not just like a vehicle guy. I can do environments. You know, I know there's a lot of environments in my portfolio, but this way I just proved that I can do it on a project. And, and then so in terms of a structure, that's how I see it. Like. But I would say I heard about structures that are more complex than that, where people specialize in like, oh, I'm going to do a spaceship. Oh, I'm going to do a gun. Oh, I will just do, I don't know, helmet designs. I don't know.
Okay, so that would break down into like weapons, vehicles, environments, props
characters,
creatures, and then keyframing. Right?
Keyframes.
Keyframe, or like, you know, like there's even like the mood stuff. Like I've got you can see it,
I would
guys,
say
but there's a God of War art book. And there's like 50 images of very rough paintings, which are like the color scheme throughout the game.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Charles Belial did on Assassin's Creed, right? He was kind of the guy who was doing a lot of the inspirational work for the game to like set the mood and set the direction, I suppose.
I think this is very similar to what they would do in like animation movies.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't, how is that called? VizDev?
VizDev, yeah.
VizDev, yeah.
It's pretty cool. I think for at least the way I've experienced stuff so far, Daniel might agree or not, is that usually people tend to be, so if you say with 3 different artists, most likely you're going to be the 3 of you on a different project, working on a different movie. Either that, or you're going to be working on the same project, but most of the time not on the same tasks. So let's say you've got to design, I don't know, you're working for a movie where there's a tank and a pirate. I'm making everything up. So maybe I'm going to do the tank and someone else.
No, don't leak your tank and pirate NDA, Jules.
No. And anyway, and the other guy's going to do a pirate.
Sure.
And otherwise it's just one person on the thing.
I think this kind of runs into a question that I got recently from somebody who was asking about kind of like what you need to get into ILM kind of thing. And I'm not going to answer that question because I don't want to get in trouble at work. But I think one of the
Daniel, steal his identity.
Please don't hurt me. I'm a very delicate boy. But I think one of the interesting questions that kind of arises from that is that if you look at the roster of artists who work at a company like ILM or Framestore or MPC or anywhere else, often they actually have very varied styles. And there's a lot of difference in the kind of work that people make in their personal time, and there's a lot of different stuff going on. But usually everybody who works at the company shows very strong fundamentals. I'm going back to that, sorry. But the question that I got was kind of like, what do you need to be able to do to work at ILM? All of these portfolios have such different looks, such different subject matters. They're all doing wildly different things. so what should I be doing to, kind of become more of a generalist artist? And I think the thing that struck me is something that maybe we could talk about almost, was like the fact that in film and maybe in games as well, if you're a generalist, the essential thing is that you can swap out with anybody else on the team. If somebody goes on holiday and that you can fill in on that character design brief or creature design brief flawlessly, and it just seamlessly transitions to the client. Do you know what I mean? You can retain as much of their style as would be possible.
For Framestore as well?
Yeah.
You guys have some incredible creature guys.
Yeah.
Is everyone
you have
just incredible
people,
at creatures, basically?
you have people who
Obviously,
specialize.
Obviously, there's some different skills, right?
Yeah.
I've been in the industry for 2 years. Some people there have been in the industry for over 10 years, maybe 20 years. Of course, they're way, way, way better than me. And I think it's similar for Daniel. He's working with some people who have been in the industry for over 20 years.
Dale's the best.
And if Daniel
Any task, man, just give it to me.
And I think that's just you work with people who have different level of experience.
Yeah,
but I think if you're hired, it's probably because they expect you to be able to do okay at all of it.
Yes. I think one of the things
Definitely
is...
in games.
Really? Okay, so I think in film, the thing is, like, let's say me and Jules are working on a project together. I'm working on a character design brief and Jules is working on a piece of architecture. I think the expectation is that if Jules went on holiday and my character design brief was on schedule to be finished on time, that I could pick up Jules's brief as well and finish it to exactly the same quality as he could, essentially. I think that is what the job is at the end of the day.
Yeah. Or to a quality that the client is fine with.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Because you might have a guy in the team who's very good at buildings and he's going to do a better job than you, but to the eye of the client, job done.
Yeah.
All good. It's acceptable.
I think also once you do reach a certain level of professionalism in the industry, to people outside of the industry, the quote unquote skill level becomes very arbitrary. I think a lot of people kind of forget that, for example, people have different styles and tastes and like different things. And, I remember as a student, a lot of people saying to me, like, if you want to reach the next level, you have to add in more photo bash into your portfolio.
Oh, yeah.
And like now as a professional being in industry, I can see that like that's not always the case. Like there's plenty of studios which are going to be much more interested in you if you can do painterly work. Or if you want to be
a professional, you need to add ACVIS in your PC.
Yeah, you have to have ACVIS. That is
press
essential.
That magic button.
That's the one thing I still don't have.
Yeah. You should get it. I heard Photo Sketcher is pretty good as well.
Well, Stefan, if you want to become a true artist,
a true professional,
if you want to unlock your third eye or whatever that means, you need to install ACVIS.
Yeah.
I did get a really nice message from somebody recently being like, oh, I really like your work and how you managed to keep it so painterly even though you use 3D. And I was like, on the inside, I was like, it's all ACVIS.
Dude.
Okay, wait, no, wait. I'm going to give myself more credit than that. It's not all ACVIS.
It is all ACVIS.
It's not all ACVIS. I can paint. I'm telling you.
Dan can paint.
I'm crying in the corner.
It's very funny because in my previous job, one of my colleagues didn't know about ACVIS. And I was using ACVIS. And one day I told him, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm using. And he was amazed by it. And he was also very sad because my work was all of a sudden way more impressive, way less impressive. Sorry, because he was like, I thought you were painting all of that. Like you had very sick skills of painting everything. And I was like, nope, just 3D.
But it would be lovely if we had the time to paint everything.
Yeah.
I will say, in terms of ACVIS, I only heavily use ACVIS on a very tight timeline.
Yeah.
Any of my personal work, I only use it to break up 3D. I use it on the lowest percentage.
I
almost
don't use it.
Yeah, I pretty much don't use it. Yeah.
It's often because once a concept with my personal taste gets to a good level, I feel like ACVIS is gonna reduce the quality of it. It's gonna look less like the aesthetic I enjoy myself.
Right. See, that's interesting because for me, I really don't like the heavy 3D look in work or the very photoreal look. So for me, having ACVIS is a great way to break up edges, and that's essentially all I use it for. Is just to because you get essentially pixel perfect edges in 3D, right? Which is not something you get in real life. It's always broken up by the light or the atmosphere hitting it a different way, or just the fluffiness of whatever the object is, or blah blah blah, a million different things.
Yeah, like the lens or something.
Yeah, the lens, a bit of smudge on the lens. But so for me, having the lowest setting of ACVIS and just running it over whatever base render I have and then painting on top of that always gives me more of the aesthetic I enjoy, because it removes the gross clinicalness of the 3D.
Yeah. I definitely don't have such tight deadlines at work, so I don't. Except I have done like some more rough concepts where I think it would have been helpful to have it. Or when I do like very quick, sometimes I have to do like before I do like final concept, I have to do like some rough iterations, and maybe then I think it would be good to like bring the photo bash together. But
it's very good to bring 3D and photo bash together.
It's like, a good combination tool, essentially.
To tie up stuff.
Yeah,
you know, it's
like
the lacquer layer on top of it.
I started
painting,
what is it?
It's like the brush strokes on a painting, really. It's like like if you threw a bit. Essentially, what you're doing in digital, right, is you're collaging a lot of the time. And one of the reasons that somebody like John Park, his work looks so amazing, or Jimmy Jones, or any of those like very painterly guys, is because they might make a bit of photo bash as a reference, but then they will paint it all from scratch from that point.
Yeah,
they're not using tools like Acvis, and that allows it to look consistent and cohesive and nice. And so, you know, it's the same thing where like if you did a piece like OPB guys, they often do like extremely heavy 3D work, but it all comes together very cohesively because the images are 95% done in 3D. Yeah. Or if you look at people who kind of were in the industry in the 90s, or not the 90s, maybe like late 2000s, they kind of have a lot more photo bash in their work. And because they're using 90% photo bash, it looks way more cohesive, and so on and so forth, right? You need to kind of pick a majority style. If you do like, I think one of the big things that I had a problem with when I was a student was I would do 3D, and then I would do some photo bash, then I'd do some 3D, then I'd paint a bit, then I'd do a bit more 3D, and then a photo bash.
Really?
Yeah, I'd like such a messy process.
Wait, so you would paste renders together?
Kind of, yeah. It just wasn't a very clinical. Like now, it's like I do my 3D, I do my photo bash, I do my paint over, and that's every single project. That's how I work it.
Yeah.
But back then, because I didn't have like a very strong idea of really how to make good concept artwork, I would just do like this random process. And so at the end, I'd be like, why doesn't my painting? I'd have like a hand-painted character next to a photoreal element on a 3D environment. And I'd be like, why doesn't this look good? Because it doesn't look cohesive.
Yeah.
Because no Acvis, probably.
Now you can just that could have been fixed by pressing one button.
Yeah, I definitely photo bash a lot at work. I don't use much 3D nowadays. Depends on what I do, but I would say with the environment work, a lot of the times I'm sure it will change, but I do like to photo bash a lot because that way I get a lot of consistency out of it, and I like it. I don't end up having a corner of something looking weird because it's all been photo bashed. It's all been photo bashed and like some paint over. I don't really know. Majority
it's funny because in film I do feel like using 3D a lot is more of a necessity than a choice, because there is the expectation from clients, especially on fast deadlines, that if you've just done a set design, you're going to hand over the 3D for that set design for the client to use.
And also just for,
I would usually...
You have loads of feedback. Yeah. And it's always, it's not
Move
like...
the camera 15 degrees to the left.
Can we make this nails a bit shorter, or can we make this eye a bit bigger?
Yeah.
Or like just that kind of stuff, which if you're doing everything in 2D is kind of annoying, and then you end up cutting and stitching your painting all the time, I really like to work in a way that I always have the same base render, and then I just build on top of it. And then so if the client asks me, can you make this element smaller, I re-render again, I slap my render into my existing Photoshop, and I just have to tweak the layers on top of that, and it's all lined up perfectly. So if it's just a tiny change in the render itself, I'm not going to redo all of it. I'm just going to re-render, slap my layers, my render layers, because I render like 10 different layers, and just put them back into the same kind of hierarchy. And then I'm just going to go back to my old, 50, 100 layers I did for the old painting.
Yeah.
And just change the ones that interact with what I changed. And since I already figured out last painting, I can sometimes you can just lasso and put it where it should be.
Yeah, I mean, layer structure is like such an important thing. I think I like whenever I see Stefan's layer structures, I want to blow my brains out.
I try really hard.
Do you know what's so funny? He always tells me he tries really hard, and then he goes, no.
Layer 520C AB.
I have a pretty decent layer structure.
His layer structure, Jules, is laughable. I mean, it's just so bad.
The thing
it's getting better.
It is getting better. I'll give you that.
But you can really go hardcore. Like I think layer structure is you can really go hardcore. Like there's degrees on it. Like
Well,
I feel like I'm messy, but I'm probably very clean compared to.
I think I'm probably cleaner than both of you. I tell you what.
Do you have color schemes? Like
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I use it as well. I use it as well.
Well, I don't
Okay,
use that.
I will often for a concept, I will color code each of the different elements in the scene. So for example, the sky will be in a blue layer folder, the environment will be in a green layer folder. No, you don't. I've seen your he's such a liar.
I do random color.
All right.
It's a nice rainbow.
Ocean is always red. Just like sky's like some.
Do you know what I'd really like is,
yellow for no reason.
The sun is always gonna be green.
Yeah.
Can we have like a video edit of scrolling through one of his layer stacks in Photoshop?
They are massive though sometimes.
But you're literally self-reporting right now.
No, but like wait. I have to do sometimes the most ridiculous like amounts of shit that I have to have. Like
Changes. You need to check. Right. So let me stop you there. The reason that you should have a tidy layer stack is so you can do changes easily.
Yeah.
I have because my layers are so. And here's the thing.
So clean always.
Here's the thing. Let me say this.
Okay.
Compared to other people I work with, my layers are terrible. Okay. My layers are really bad compared to some people I work with who do incredibly clean layer organization. Yeah. But I have found that the better my layer structure has got, and this is not something that I don't do this when I'm doing personal work because there aren't client changes. But when I have to deal with a client change and they say, can you move building Y more to the right of screen X and make this area darker and add a shadow here, it takes me like when I started the job and I was doing tasks like that, it would take me a day to do those changes. Now it takes me an hour.
Yeah, because you're like, okay, click this, boom.
Yeah,
done.
Exactly.
You know where you're going. You know.
And
also,
how long does it take you to do a change, Stefan?
Easy, like same time.
That's not true.
I don't think
you've been saying that while saying no with your head.
Yeah. He's screaming for help in his eyes.
I have very, very complicated paintings. Like I do. Oh fuck off. Whatever.
Yeah, sorry. You're right, Stefan. Your work is so much more complicated than ours. How could we ever deem ourselves worthy of understanding your layer structure?
I agree.
Your layer structure is like angels. They're ineffable and unknowable.
I never seen Stefan's layer structure.
We'll next time.
I will apply the non-guilty until proven.
Right.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not a lawyer.
Not guilty.
Innocent until proven guilty.
That's it.
Oh yeah.
Let's go.
Right. Should we actually talk about the subject matter that we were meant to be talking about?
Well,
that was like one hell of a side note.
I mean, it was interesting.
It was interesting for us.
Hopefully, it was interesting for the listener.
I don't care about the listener.
10 people just unsubscribe.
Just don't forget that this podcast is just a therapy of our friendship.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I think making the event is a therapy for.
No. This is a therapy from the event. Yeah.
We would all be buried by now. But
I mean, I want
specialist versus generalist.
Right? Yeah.
So I wanna bring up two things because I've been wanting to bring this up. One is hard surface specialists, guys, because we all know a lot of hard surface specialist guys who just do exclusively hard surface.
Shout out to
and
boys.
I feel like that's a very interesting niche that exists even more exclusively to almost anything else. Like even if you have guys who do sci-fi, they will never be just a guy who just does swords, right? You will have a guy who just does guns in fantasy. Sorry, I want to say even if you have guys who, for example, do fantasy, you will never just have a guy who does fantasy swords. You'll have a guy who will do fantasy armor, maybe, and
okay. Can I cut in there? I think it's to do with the amount of need for things. It's the supply and demand, right? If you're doing a game like Call of Duty, yeah, it's probably a good idea to have a guy who can just smash out all of the guns, right?
Yeah.
Especially considering.
But how about Mountain Blade? I don't know. They had like all historical weapons.
About what? Sorry?
Mountain Blade.
Never heard of it.
Oh, okay.
But let me put this out
No,
there.
but they probably had someone who did all the weapons, no? All the armors.
But the difference is between, let's say, like an AR-15. Right, so you're doing an AR-15 design for Call of Duty, and you have to make it legally viable, right? Because that's what all of their guns are. So that they can call it the AR-17 or whatever, and be like, it's not. Don't sue us, AR, whoever the company is. I don't know. Is it Malawan from Borderlands that makes the AR-15? Yeah. And, you know, so they're doing that. And I would say that there's a lot of probably design, or, okay, maybe I'm shitting on a bunch of people here, but there's a lot of design that goes into redesigning an AR-15 to make it legally viable to put in a game like Call of Duty. And it's good to have a specialist in because they're going to understand, like, the difference between certain muzzle brakes and, you know, ejection mechanisms for bullets or whatever. With a medieval fantasy game, you have to think like, okay, if I'm designing a sword, it only needs to be a 2D plane, right? I could draw the sword and photobash it and it's done. There doesn't really need to be much more design.
But certain things like helmets,
sure
for
about
example,
that.
helmets are very difficult. You need to specialize to know like
I
what
think-
kind of
I
medieval
think
helmets
th-
exist.
There's
and-
just, you know, anything medieval has history.
That's also true.
There's so much more reference to get, like, you know, humanity has evolved and we have all the past and we can just take from there.
Yeah.
So if you do a medieval game, you just you go in the museum and that's it. You
no,
don't.
it's true.
But if you were tasked with designing a sword, would you build a 3D model of the sword? Because I don't think I would.
No.
Well, yeah, I guess it depends what I've got to do. If you have to do
yeah, depends like what kind of
if it's a
complexity of
VFX
sword.
if it's a VFX close up of the
yeah, fine.
sword,
Yeah.
then I would, yeah.
But my point is, if somebody had to build it for a game,
Yeah.
the AR-15, you can't just give them a side view, right? You have to give them a 3/4, a side view, a top down, a bottom down, or just a 3D model, which is well done.
Yeah.
With the case of a sword, you can just give it's a flat object
Yeah.
essentially, right?
I guess
Same with the shield,
there's-
same with a lot of like medieval stuff.
there's just a very big demand for sci-fi work, and it's true that if I think about concept art specialists, the first thing that comes to my mind is hard surface.
Yes.
So what do you...
Hard surface is the definition of concept art specialist.
So now...
Really? Because I think that might be to do more with people we know. I mean,
maybe
there's also, there's loads of specialists in creatures for sure. There's
Keyframe
loads of
specialists.
specialists. I mean, look at like Aaron McBride. He's a character specialist essentially in the film industry.
true characters, creatures. I feel like characters and creatures are very similar.
But really, I mean, in anything you can specialize and have a niche if you're good enough at it.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Vitaly Bulgarov, who, you know, Stefan's wet dream of a designer. But I mean,
Really?
am I wrong?
No, I don't
Yeah.
know. No, I think...
But Vitaly Bulgarov, right, has like an extremely weird niche that he's in. I mean, his niche is Vitaly Bulgarov.
Yeah.
I mean,
just like hard surface plus fantasy right now.
And I don't
Super
think
weird.
and I don't think I would class him as like necessarily like a quote unquote hard surface guy as much as I would say he just has a niche. Just as I would say like Callum Alexander Watt, who is also a really fucking sick artist, has a niche in doing a lot of like character and prop and background design for movies. Or
But you just said loads of stuff right now. Characters, props, and backgrounds.
no, he does lots of characters for movies, right? So like for Quantum Mania, he did like all of the like pre-production like background characters and
These
stuff.
are so good.
Right.
These are so good.
So he specializes in that, is what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, like, I think when people say, you know, you need to specialize and, oh, this person has a niche or whatever, really it's just about having a niche in something that you're really passionate about. I don't think it matters. In a way, like, when you find a real niche, like something that you are really good at, it is often kind of beyond classification in a way.
Yeah.
It's not like, you're not like, oh, yeah, they're a creature designer. You're like, oh, I'm hiring that person to do their thing.
Yeah,
it's like their
yeah.
niche is just their thing in quotes.
Okay,
If that makes
so-
sense.
Like creatures for Pokemon, for Sonic,
Right.
for you know, like all that kind
What's
of
that guy's name?
Well, I don't know.
There's the guy who does that, right? There's
Yeah.
the guy who specializes in
Forgot the
Pokemon
name, but
designs.
yeah, that kind of stuff.
Or you look at like Andrea Ciampo and his like amazing creature designs. It's
Yeah.
like, well, what are you hiring him for? You're not hiring him to be a creature specialist per se. You're hiring him to be him and to do his thing, right? And that's kind of how I think it's a more useful way of thinking about niches and specializations.
And you can broaden that by even bringing that from studios. I think like ILM has a certain specific ILM feel. same frame store as specific frame store feel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people kind of have vaguely house styles. I would say ILM doesn't really have a house style, honestly, in my opinion.
San Francisco has.
No, I don't think so. If you look at the difference between, oh god, wow, I'm blanking people's names. I think Lucasfilm might have a house style. ILM San Francisco does not have a house style.
Okay,
Definitely not. If you look at the difference between somebody like, I can name off the top of my head, Alexander Jaeger.
Okay.
Sorry?
Just want to have a question. Been trying to say it, you know.
Oh, can I finish?
I just turn it. I see Stefan.
You guys keep going,
shouting silently.
But I mean, if you're looking at like, I don't think ILM is a house style, because even if you look at San Francisco, which is one of the kind of longer running parts of the company, right? So if you look at Alexander Jaeger, Casey Straka, and I don't know, like James Klein, all very, very, very different styles of work and different things that they specialize in. And I've seen them all like kind of move between projects and work on different stuff, but I can always tell who's doing what, you know?
Yeah, and I guess also we, at the end, all these companies end up working on very similar projects. So
yeah. I think in the end of the day, it's just about
maybe not so much.
being able to hit the client's expectations, whilst also having some personality with what you do, because different clients will prefer different styles of art.
All right, I've got a question.
No, Stefan has a question.
I have a question. So my question is, now related to the specializing, do you think it's beneficial in terms of
Getting a job?
Getting a job?
That was my question as well.
Wow. Really shows minds. How good is that?
That happened when you were screaming at each other.
Or like brain connection through pain.
Air? No.
It's both shouting at rockets or something.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Do you think it helps you also in terms of monetary reasons? Like
in terms of what reason?
Like monetary reasons. Do you think you would be earning more money if you're a specialist? Like, I don't really know how much money those guys earn, but I would imagine if you are a guy who can do a thing and they go specifically to you, they don't go to someone else, then they only have one option in the world. It's just you. So they pay you more, right?
So can I say this? I'm just going to go back to what I said. If in terms of like, if the niche will make you pay more, if you're really good at what you do, you'll get paid more. That is the end of it at the end of the day.
No matter what you do.
Yeah.
Basically.
And if
whether you're a specialist, generalist,
and if you specialize in being a generalist and you're like truly the best at that, then you're gonna make a lot of money. Okay. I think it's just people who are at the top of their game make a lot of money. And I think there's also always the opportunity where if you do specialize in something, that a project will come along and every other person who even vaguely specializes that is caught up in something else, and you are like the one guy they can come to. And they just have to offer you insane money because they don't have a choice.
Specialization probably can reach out more money as freelance than a generalist with the same skill level.
So, for example, there was
because they can just hit that specific demand. And as you said, if there's not really other person available, they might just ask for more money.
Yeah, but might always be a specific demand for a generalist as well.
There was
I think it's kind of the same. It's one and the same to me, at least in my mind. But
there was a thing that on a podcast with John Park and with Che or something, when he was saying that specializing helped him to be more recognizable, for example. That for a while, John Park was the mech guy, and all he did was mechs. And everyone remembered, the mech guy, and everyone would be like, oh yeah, John Park, you mean, right? Yeah. And then he became the guy who does painterly things, and then everyone would be like, the guy who does painterly concepts, and everyone would be like thinking in their heads, it's John Park, We know that it's just not just John Park, right? But
he's the only one who does it, I think.
And
Max.
But he does have like a portfolio. Like even if you go on his ArtStation now, I think it's very much just this one thing that he does.
Yeah.
And everything. And even though he probably has hundreds of other concepts, he deletes or never posts that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it makes him very like sellable for that. And like for example, Richard as well. It's an example. Like Richard has a specific style of specific things that he does.
I'd say this,
and he only has that in his portfolio, and I think that makes him a lot more recognizable.
I think it's this. Everything you said is true, but it implies people who are already in the industry. I feel like if you're a student and you want to get paid, ends working, I think you have more chance of being hired. Personally, I think if you're a generalist.
You can improve a lot faster if you just have a niche, though. In that niche.
That's true, yeah. But I think one of the things is, if you're a student and you want to get in the industry, there's some very basic things you have to do no matter what you choose to do, which is you have to be able to show off a certain amount of fundamental skills. You have to be able to do props because they're the most needed things in games, right? And games jobs are more available than films jobs. You have to be able to reach certain render and finish qualities. You have to be able to iterate successfully in design. And if you can do all of those things to a professional level, then if you can say like, oh, and also I'm really good at doing environments, that's just the icing on top of the cake. I think here's another political controversial statement from me, but a lot of people talk about how the concept art industry is super, 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 oh God, what's the word? Oh man, I've lost the word. Competitive. It's competitive. People always talk about it being really competitive. And I always think that's kind of a little bit of a misrepresentation. I think it's more to do with people misunderstanding the basic criteria that will get you into the industry.
The entry doors are very hard to access. Not that many people even access them.
And that's why it's not competitive at all,
so
actually.
There's not there's a lot of competition to become good enough. Competitive, yeah. But yeah, that's true. Like, especially when I think it's something that, I mean, when I was looking for a job, I really thought and believed that there was just too many other people that were just too good. Not really. It's just that there's like maybe one person that's too good, and that one person is gonna get the job. It's not that there's 20% that are too good or better than you. It's just one or two, but they're gonna get.
That's enough.
Yeah, that's enough. And the road there is so steep and so long. Let's say that it's just
a lot of people drop out along the way. Very much. Yeah. Stefan, you got any opinions on this thing that you asked?
About if it with John Park and stuff like that.
You asked whether he can't even remember his own question. This guy over here.
No, I remember whether it's
beneficial
in terms
as a
of
student,
money.
or in terms of money to have a niche and be a specialist, or to be a generalist.
I think it is beneficial. I think.
What do you think is beneficial? You can't just say I think it's beneficial.
Our brains are destroyed.
No. I think it's too late. I think it's. What do you mean? We're recording it in the middle of the day when it's.
It's perfect.
So, I think it's beneficial to have some niche and specialize in something in terms of monetary and also like getting faster to a certain skill. Now, is it something that you want to do? If it's not, then I don't think you should do it. It's something that I never wanted to do. I think I had also like a broader thing. As I said, I like sci-fi, I like fantasy, I like environments, I like keyframes, I like vehicles, props. The only thing I don't like is characters, and that's the one thing that I excluded out of the things that I focused on in terms of like learning how to do, and that makes me happy, and that's what's important to me. And I don't care right now, but I do think that maybe one day I will try to focus on either on a certain style or maybe do what John Park did to be a bit more, let's say, like memorable.
That's a nice note to end on, though, because at the end of the day, a lot of people across your career, as you're getting into your career, will give you advice and they'll tell you to do one thing. And everybody has survivorship bias. Everything we've said today on the podcast as well is completely fueled by our own biases about how we got into the industry and people we know.
Also, it's highly impacted by the film industry.
Sure.
It's just both of us are in there.
But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is that you enjoy what you're doing and you can get to a level where you can monetize it to some extent, essentially.
It's true that if you don't enjoy, like if you want to specialize in doing art surface and you don't like it,
then what's the point?
Don't do it, because you're never going to become good enough.
Yeah.
Because one last thing as well, to be able to specialize into art surface or into anything, it's probably a bit harder than to become generalist in a way. I'm going to explain. You can be meh at everything as being a generalist, meh as good enough. But if you want to be a specialist, you can't be meh at art.
You have to be amazing.
You have to be very, very, very good.
If you just do hard surface,
you have to be one of the best to be a competent, hireable, desirable art surface artist.
If you do like characters as well, for example, you have to be really amazing and have really good ideas.
That's why I think it's always better to just try and be.
But always character.
Well, you should just make things that you like at the end of the day.
Yeah.
like I said, people are going to give you advice. You're listening to this, and we're trying to give you advice. But don't
listen to us.
Well, in a way, don't let other people's opinions of the best route for your career skew it, because everybody has a different path up the mountain. Everybody takes a different route to get there, and at the end of the day, that's all that really matters, is that you find your own way up.
Like, look, if you like sketching, just do sketching and be the best at sketching, and and that will get you money at some point, and people will appreciate it in this industry as well.
Yeah, well, that's the end, I guess.
Like,
you want to close? Give us a closing comment, Stefan.
Hey, the closing comment is follow your dreams and believe that you will make it. And whether you want to specialize or you want to be a generalist concept artist,
it's getting long. Wrap it up.
No, just do it. Just do it and do whatever
right,
you
yes.
like.
Just do it. Nike, please sponsor us. Yes. Thank you very much. This has been the Concept 101 podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please feel free to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're listening on Spotify, follow along on that, or whatever you click to do that on Spotify. Jules, do you know what you click on that? No, he doesn't. Thank you so much. Follow,
yeah,
maybe.
I think follow. You follow artists.
And the notification bell on YouTube.
Notification bell.
And
we release podcast every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So make sure to stay there and
stay there.
Please
don't leave.
Just be ready to until you release, so you can click on it the same second and be the first comment.
Every Thursday, every 2 weeks. That doesn't make sense. At 11 a.m. Podcast is released.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.